long hair, a beard, and a happy smile. 10 years ago, José Salvador Alvarenga became a celebrity. The photos, which instantly spread across the globe, were taken just a few days after his miraculous rescue. For a full 14 months, José had drifted across the Pacific Ocean in a flimsy boat until he finally washed ashore on the coast of the Marshall Islands. And here is José Salvador Alvarenga again, now shaved and with a haircut, reuniting with his parents and daughter. His relatives couldn't hold back their tears, admitting that they had lost all hope of ever seeing him alive again. His rescue was described as nothing short of an act of divine providence. However, neither the fisherman nor his family suspected at the time that their ordeal was far from over. Ahead lay a court battle and numerous interrogations, during which José would have to recount, time and again, his story, one worthy of a Hollywood film adaptation. The story began on a fine November day in 2012, when José decided to go fishing once more to earn money for Christmas. As it turned out, his usual partner was held up by a court matter and couldn't join him. Going out on such a voyage alone wasn't wise, so while walking along the beach, he met a young man to whom he offered a job fishing. The young man gladly agreed, though he immediately confessed that he had no fishing experience. Together with his chance partner, 22-year-old Ezequiel Córdoba, José planned to spend only a day at sea, so he brought along a small amount of food and 20 liters of water. In the evening, when the fisherman had cut the engine 60 kilometers from shore, a storm began. The ocean is unpredictable. One moment it can be calm, and half an hour later, a storm can rage. The weather is very volatile, with constantly changing conditions. For an unprepared person, surviving in such situations is, of course, extremely difficult. José Salvador Alvarenga later confessed that the sea resembled a boiling cauldron. Waves crashed over them one after another, and the boat was tossed from side to side. The storm raged for 4 days. José did everything he could to keep the boat from capsizing, while his partner simply lay curled up in a ball. Paralyzed by intense fear, Ezequiel Córdoba was as if frozen. Nothing changed even after the sea calmed down. It seemed the young man had resigned himself to his inevitable death. He lay silently on the floor of the boat as it drifted across the endless expanse of the ocean. José Salvador Alvarenga, on the other hand, clung to life with all his might. He fished and caught seagulls. According to José, he devised a method to prevent the food from spoiling. When he caught seagulls, he would tear off their wings and keep them alive in the boat. This allowed the food to be preserved for a longer period. He also recounted catching turtles and drinking their raw blood. Ezequiel Córdoba, no matter how hard he tried, could not bring himself to eat raw meat or drink blood. Eventually, from hunger, dehydration, and the scorching sun, he became delirious. Ezequiel would sometimes stare out at the sea for a very long time and say that he could see a supermarket, that he saw groceries, and would ask, "Can you buy it for me?" After 4 months, Ezequiel Córdoba died. But at first, José couldn't accept that he was left completely alone in the vast ocean. For 5 days, the fisherman talked to his deceased partner. A few days before Ezequiel's death, José had promised to deliver his body to his parents if he were to die. However, on the 6th day after his death, he threw the body overboard. As it turned out later, this act would prove to be fateful for José Salvador Alvarenga. When his boat washed ashore on the Marshall Islands 10 months later, he became a hero to some, a man who survived thanks to his courage and resourcefulness, but to others, a cannibal. Rumors began to circulate that the starving fisherman had eaten his partner. Many skeptics and others didn't believe that he hadn't eaten his partner after his death. In most cases where 2 or more companions are stranded and one of them dies, people resort to cannibalism. José Salvador Alvarenga himself denied these accusations. When asked how he managed to survive, he answered it was all thanks to his good physical condition, his fishing experience, and a daily routine. The man insisted that for all 14 months he strictly followed a schedule, waking, eating, and sleeping at set times. He also sang a lot to keep from going mad with loneliness. The human body is unpredictable. It often adapts to different conditions. It all depends on the psychological state and mindset of the person. If a person is ready and determined to really survive, then such cases are possible. However, these arguments failed to convince the relatives of Ezequiel Córdoba. They filed a lawsuit against José Salvador Alvarenga, accusing him of cannibalism and demanding $1 million in compensation. Journalists covering the unusual trial recalled a similar story. In the second half of the 19th century, all of Great Britain followed the high-profile case of cannibal sailors. The incident took place in 1884. The yacht Magnet was caught in a storm. Only 4 sailors survived, adrift in a single lifeboat. Their only provisions were a few cans of food and 1 turtle. It should be noted that sailors often took turtles with them as a sort of living pantry, because turtles could survive for a long time and their meat was very nutritious. But for 4 men, this supply of food was far too little. Adrift in the Atlantic Ocean, the sailors recalled an old tradition known as the custom of the sea. According to it, 1 crew member must sacrifice themselves to save the others. Who it would be usually was decided by drawing lots, but this time they didn't. The cabin boy, Richard Parker, was so weak that everyone understood he was not long in this world. Seeing that the youngest crew member had fallen into a state of delirium, the captain stabbed the young man. His body became the sustenance for the remaining sailors. 4 days after the killing, the lifeboat was discovered by German sailors. The 3 weakened crew members were brought on board, along with the cabin boy's body, and the Britons were later put on trial. The accused did not deny the charges. The sensational trial lasted for several months. The defendants' lawyers argued that if the sailors had not resorted to such a terrible act, they simply would not have survived. Nevertheless, the fact of the murder was undeniable. The 3 surviving crew members of the Magnet were sentenced to death, but Queen Victoria herself intervened in the case. The verdict included a plea to Queen Victoria for a pardon, and the Queen agreed to it. As a result, the sentence was commuted to 6 months' imprisonment. This was the last case where the ancient and terrible custom of the sea was considered a mitigating factor, and even then, only thanks to the influence of a very influential person. After 6 months, the crew of the Magnet was released. Unlike the British sailors, José Salvador Alvarenga was not just pardoned, he was exonerated. The Salvador's fisherman passed a polygraph test 3 times. The lie detector indicated that José was telling the truth. Ezequiel Córdoba's relatives demanded $1 million in compensation, and this happened just as the fisherman came into a substantial amount of money. The miraculously surviving José told his story to journalist Jonathan Franklin, who wrote a book based on it. The main hero received a portion of the proceeds from the sales of the book. José himself is certain that Ezequiel Córdoba's relatives simply decided to get rich at his expense.